Okay, a little talk about putting the back fin on and the motor, the trim motor. And, we've already done this on the bench before. And if you look at my forum post, it's important that this is the jack screw right here. And it goes through this piece here. They're very, very tight when you get them. And I actually take a bunch of grease. I explained it in the forum. I take a bunch of grease. As you can see, there's lots of grease on here. But on the bench, I take it and I run it through here a bunch of times, maybe 50 times, back and forth up through there. And it will loosen up. This is, of course, aluminum, and it's threaded for the jack screw that moves this up and down, which will move the stabilizers up and down, which will affect your trim. So anyway, make sure you pay attention to the post and do that, or it might be very stiff. Also, when you go to put the jack screw in, it goes down through this part here. So it goes down this way. This is a thrush bearing that's right here. It'll go down through there. And then, of course, you have to put that down through there, then take the yoke, which you see which direction it faces with this angle down. And you should have assembled this already, this piece to this earlier in the build, in the manual. Okay, and then when you get down to the bottom, make sure you put a 6/16 screw, a washer, a 6/16L washer goes above and beyond this post. There's a post right here that you can see that bottom of this goes through, and then it continues on down to the bottom or to meet it with the motor shaft. Okay, so anyway, you'll probably find, I've always found it's too stiff, powder coat or whatever, so I take a drill, I put like a big bit on the end of it, like a 3/8 or whatever, and then I tape some like 100 grit sandpaper and roll it up on the drill, and then hold it together so I can put it down in this hole right here. Then I just run the drill up and down so it actually basically sands, makes it like a sander drum, and just keep sanding, and then put a little grease on it, and then try the jack screw it all the way down into that bottom part through this piece here. That's the two places it has to go, through here to here, and then turn it. Just do it with the jack screw. Do that before you install the yoke, just while you're testing it. And keep doing that until you get it to where it moves smooth. Okay, I've had it so hard you couldn't even move it. And it helps to take, I guess, like I say, some grease, and grease down here on this piece, and put it in there, and then pull it back out and sand some more until you get it to where it moves freely on its own. These motors are pretty powerful motors, but they'll bog down pretty good. I think a lot of that's the misalignment, or between this one and the bottom piece is maybe a little misaligned, because you'll get this nice and smooth to go through here, but once you get it and have to move it around to get it through this bottom piece, that's what maybe sometimes binds it. So you want to do that. So they tell you in the manual about going ahead and installing the elevator. Get you a long 1/4-inch drill bit. You'll have to take it, if you've got it on the rotator, you'll have to take it off the rotator so you can put the elevator on here. But pre-drill out the holes here, and then the ones on the elevator that'll go in there. The elevator has a male one that slides in between these two on both sides. So basically that's setting the distance, top and bottom. I think it's 34 inches or something it shows in the manual, but don't do that. You put the elevator up there, and then you make sure it's correct, and then you come back and you'll match, I think you matched drilled, yeah, you match drilled a hole through here, and you put this bolt. The head of the bolt's gonna come back here, and you'll have fabric that comes back here, and you'll be covering around this, but again, this will be in the middle, and you'll have your rudder back here, so you're gonna kind of cover up. That always leaves a little ugly little bump in the fabric, but I always use the gap seals anyway, so I put that gap seal in that goes over, you'll never even see it. But just make sure you don't, you put it with the head on this side, and the nut on the inside will be away from the fabric. Once you do that, then you want to the elevator will come back over, and it'll come across the top here. And then, so once you got the back on, then take this front part, it goes down and sits in this little slot here. There's a slot in there. When it sits down in there, then just take this slot and move it up or down until you kept an even distance between this and the bottom of the elevator, just so you have a nice even distance. Once you got that, then it doesn't give you a dimension that I could find. I just come down a little ways and with good clearance, and I drill the holes for this piece, okay? Ends up with a number 12, so I drill it with like a number 30 to start with. It's a lot easier drilling, and then I go back to something a little bit bigger, you know, a little bit bigger, like maybe a 20 or something like that, and I end up with a 12 that goes through here and takes this. I think it's a 3-12A bolt that goes through here. You'll have pre-assembled this part here, and again, they got the manual updated to show that the 6/16Ls or 4/16Ls that go in between on either side of this pulley that's here. Put your cable in there. That cable is going to then attach to the back of the spring, and it'll show you the hardware to mount it to the spring on here. And then the other spring, this is going to mount later after you install the tail feathers. So right now, you just want to get it out of the way. They show you taping it up here along the sides of one of these. Make sure to start with, you're going to be moving. You notice this moves up and down with the yoke. As it moves up and down, it has to move too. So don't install it and then go stretching it out here and then tape it onto the fuselage. And then later you start moving this and it'll just pull it off. What that does is that's actually an assist to make the elevator not so heavy when you're, as you move the trim. It also helps move the assistance with the springs, so it takes the load off, so it makes it easier to move. But in any case, you don't want to tape it to the fuselage up here like they show in the manual anyway, because you're going to be covering this, so you'll have your tape and your spring taped up here in the way, and you don't want all that tape on here anyway. So I just tape it, see here, and that's fine until it finishes the end of the build. There's a inspection, a rectangular, big inspection rectangular cover down here, which will come up through and work in here. Okay, so later we'll grab this spring. You can grab stuff and you can pass it back to your openings if you got back here. There's another one back here, a round one, and suppose you'll have your rudder lights that'll wrap around this and come back in here. About 9 inches up from here, you'll just burn a hole, stick it back in here, and then you'll reach up in here, you'll grab that, and this is the back of the wiring harness for the lights that's coming down through the stringer, okay? And so that's where we'll actually connect it back here. So when you tape this to the fuselage here, give yourself a little room so you can move it around, because you're gonna grab, you got a lot of wire coming off that rudder. It'll come back here. You'll put this together and hook the ground wires together. You'll have to put the cover on those wires once you stick it through the cover here. So that's why you don't want to put, when I cover the elevator, you don't want to put your connector in on those wires yet, because you're going to have to drill a hole and squish it down small and push them through there and pull it through that hole in there in the fabric to bring it back and connect these wires. Another thing to remember is that this blue wire is a ground wire right here. Not that one, but yeah, that's a ground wire there that's going to the lights. But that ground, you see, is going to go, this is the data plate holder on the other side. And so it's going to be a ground. So I take it right now, I go and get my little Dremel sander and I sand the powder coat off of this. Now it's nice and easy. Later, when we mount the data plate through the fabric onto the back here, this will go up here, and that way we'll have a nice ground. So clean that off now. These are a pain in the butt, little bitty screws and washers and nuts that you have to get your hands up in there. But anyway, when you tape this up and get your wire out here, just make sure that you have enough room where that's going to go over and mount on one of these, whichever one of these holes. But that's the hole I use there. So tape it up there so you got enough hanging down here so you can work with it. So that's taped there. This tape, the fabric will go over this tape. You probably never notice it. And it comes along here, it goes to here, and then the slack is out to here, okay? So that's kind of how that goes. What's kind of strange, and then these are the little elevator adjustment stops, bolts that we'll put in now. This is kind of new to the EX3. And, well, it may have been on the EX2 also, I can't remember. But in any case, later on when we adjust the elevator maximum movements, the horn of the elevator will come back and hit these, and so we can adjust them until we get the angles right on there. So anyway, just get those in now. A lot easier to get those in started now with the stop nuts on them now, because later this will all be fabric and you'd have to come back in through here and really be a pain in the butt to get 2. So do that. The when you come up here, this is all pretty self-explanatory. You'll see it. There's a screw that goes through this side. It's just to kind of hold that cable on that side, and that cable comes up through here. And of course, it's going to the spring, and it's going to this side, and the hardware is all called out. That's the little black bracket you put around the yoke. When you come back up in here, so the fin's on this front side. After you drill that hole, then of course that's where this bracket will mount through and go through, and then you have a washer and a nut on the other side. This one actually has, of course, a castellated nut and a cotter pin since you want it to spin. So you may have to, if it's a little too tight, then you may have to pry this bracket apart just a little bit, give it a little bit more room so it'll spin a little easier. Now, once you route your cables, your wires back here. So you just route them down the stringer all the way from the front. They're gonna go through this grommet, right here. So you got your trim sensor wire. That if you got the sensor, if you've got the G3X, you'll have the sensor. They'll go to the panel. That's the little wire. Then you'll have the big bundle of white wires. That's the one that's going back for your lights and the power. And then the orange wires should be 3 orange wires. Will be 2 with the end of it will have another little short one that'll go to a ground later. So just attach it. I just detached it for testing, but it's attached to the end of these wires together. These wires, I've got them loose now because I'm going to show you how I test the system. I just do that so I can bring them back a little further. But these wires will go through here also. All the orange wires will then go down here. And this is the little place they made to put your wires that goes down underneath the floorboard, and it'll go to the belly pan, and later will be attached to the panel wires that are going underneath the panel. So in any case, you can just run them up there, and then right now we're going to pull these loose. So just so they'll reach this battery. If I had a longer temporary wire I made up, I could move this battery on up here somewhere where I wouldn't have to do that, but that's the reason those wires are loose. So you just run those down in here. Later, I haven't done it yet, but after everything's completely done, which I just finished, I'll situate these all up in there and I'll silicone them in place also. You can see where the last thing I did after I made sure everything fit and worked. Come back, put a little electrical tape all on this edge, and then drill a hole through there and just put a zip tie so you can attach the end of it there that holds it, nice and firm. So you're going to, if you notice, you're going to have to, you go to the G3X, the executive glass manual for the information on this trim sensor. That's what this is. So the trim sensor, first this is a little bracket right here. So you have to rivet this bracket to the sensor, okay? So look at the executive glass manual. There's 2 little squeeze rivets here and here. So you do that first. And then when you mount, first you're gonna, like the manual says, it's pretty good about that. You just put your screws, your jack screw down into there, then screw it into the yoke and keep it coming down. Make sure you put your washer on there and then get it all the way down until the screw bottoms out on that piece right there. So it's all the way down. Now, and then it'll just be sitting there. There's a couple of stop screws. These are your trim stop screws right here. I know the lights aren't that good in here at an angle, but these are your trim stop screws, and there's limit switches, as you can see right here. That's how to click on and off. And there's a top and a bottom one. I show you those in the manual here and here. This sucker here has always been a big problem, okay? It's got a sleeve of a nut here, and then another one on the top. And I think the welding or something, they never line up. I don't know how many I've twisted off. They'll start up in there, and you'll go so far, and they'll twist off. I mean, they'll stick so hard, they won't go either way, and that's not even putting much pressure on them. I don't understand what it is or why it does it, but every single one is done. It's a real pain in the butt. I've drilled them out, I've re-tapped them, I've done all kinds of stuff. So just be very careful. If you got a tap, maybe running a tap to it. I did that with a tap once and broke the tap. It got stuck so hard. So I don't understand, really what's going on with this at all. I need to get with somebody and ask them. There's definitely a defect here. So be careful with this. Get it started up from the bottom, and then make sure you got your set screw on that. So once you got that installed in there, then we're gonna come back on top, and there's a thrush bearing or thrush whatever. It's just a piece of sleeve that goes on the top. And so your jack screw is all the way down, and you can take this thrust bearing and it'll just fit down there, and you can tap it with a hammer. Just make sure you look back and make sure the bottom of that jack screw is sitting all the way down at the bottom. Once you got it all the way down, there is a hole here already. So then you're gonna match drill through this hole. You're gonna go to a letter F. This is using a 3-12A bolt, I think, which is a 1.87 or 1.89 diameter bolt, but they want you to go to a letter F, which is like a 2.259. And so they don't even tell you why you're doing that, but they do. If you look real close in the figure, there's a sleeve, a bushing, a little round bushing. And for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason, you drill that hole that big, then you slide that bushing in, which goes all the way over, and that'll fit the outside diameter of that. It will fit inside the hole you drilled, and then the inside diameter makes it. Then you put the bolt through the sleeve, or bushing, or whatever you want to call it, and then put the nut and bolt. So this is here. It's separate from the top of the jack screw, but it's holding that jack screw in place so it can't go anywhere. Okay. So once you've done that, I come back over, and you're gonna get your motor ready to install. Now, notice the motor is, you see the top of the motor here is actually offset, so there's like a little transmission in there. So the motor's over here on this side. There's a little hole up here in this plate. You can see the top of the motor right there. Right there. Right there's the top of the motor. And this is the drive shaft, or whatever you want to call it, coming off of it. It comes up through there. And it has this, but over the top of it is a bushing that goes over and connects the jack screw to the motor. So when it turns, obviously it'll turn the jack screw. Well, they forget to tell you in the manual, but if you're reading the forum post, I tell you that they just say, put the motor on there. Well, you can't do that. You got the jack sleeve here, and you push the motor up in here, and you'll find out later that they didn't tell you about putting this sleeve on there until they talk about later about drilling it and putting the pins in it. So obviously before you slide that motor up in place, there's a big enough hole there. You just slide the sleeve on it, and there's two pre-drilled holes. There's one here, and I've already got the pins in them now. I haven't safety wired them yet, but I will. And you got a pin here high. So this pin here is going through the jack screw, the end of the jack screw. And there's a pre-drilled hole already in that jack screw, okay? And then down here at the bottom, this bottom one, the motor drive piece, whatever, the little piece coming out of the motor, has a flat side on it. So we're gonna drill, this is a number 30 for both of these, we're gonna drill a number 30 all the way through that, and then push this pin in, and it'll just slide in, and you tap it in with a hammer, then we're gonna safety wire it. But what I tell you to do in the forum is before I put this sleeve over the motor, axle, or whatever you call it, the flat part, which we want to put that hole into, I take a blue Sharpie and I color the whole flat part in with that blue Sharpie. And the reason is, when we get it set up like this, and then we come back and start putting our bolts in, and I don't understand, there's two longer bolts, they say, on this side. This side has longer bolts than this side. Now I know this one would be longer because it has the clamp that's going to hold the wires over here. But it seemed like this one would be the shorter. It seemed like you want this one longer, and you want these two longer because they've got the bracket. So I don't know, but the manual says 2 shorter bolts on that side, 2 longer bolts on this side. I believe A10, 936 A10s, which are like star washers, lock washers they call for them. They're not in the kit, never been in the kit. So either order some or get them. Also, the little screws that you install these limiter switches here, and here, they call for washers, which they have, the screws, which they have, and they also call for number 3 star washers here. There's none in the kit. Okay, so for some reason they didn't put the 3s or the 10s in the kit. These have washers and star washers, both of them do, to kind of lock it in. The manual does tell you in the manual, in the figure, They usually do this with red Loctite on these bolts. I checked with Mitch a long time ago. It says do not use red, to use blue. The figure that's there still has red, and I know normally you go by the figure, but I've confirmed you do not use red Loctite, you use blue. And then if you look later in the new manual, they do actually say in the written part of the manual to use blue. So you use blue, not red. Okay, so the last thing you'll do, that you take this, I run all the wires through this, except for the one that's going back. Well, there's not enough room in that clamp to fit all this with that big wire here. So I just run it up over this lip. I'm actually gonna come back and I'll put some sleeves, some other spiral wrap over here, just to make sure it doesn't chafe on that area right there. Then it comes up, see, then of course it goes on back there. So you got enough room in there to put all the wires, which will be your trim switch wires. There's a pretty good bundle of those. Take the wire from your sensor, okay? This is your trim sensor. This is a little wire, see, that's connected. It pulls out. It's a little bitty thin wire, and it attaches to the back side of that bracket. That bracket has two holes. One's gonna hold the cable with the spring on the other end, and this one's going in the sensor. So as this goes up and down, we're gonna calibrate it later. When you get into G3X later, we're gonna put it to the neutral position. And actually I do it after I fly, so I know where it really is, neutral. So where it's flying straight and level, and you trim it to where it is, and then you look and see where your trim indicator is, and you'll see it's off a little bit. So what it is when I'm testing this out, I'll come back, I'll go fly one time, and I'll make sure that I'm up flying straight and level and trim straight and level. And then when I land, I make sure I don't touch the trim. Because then when I land, then what I'll do is I'll go in and calibrate the sensor. And what I do is I don't move it. So the first calibration I do is neutral, or the center. So I say this point where it's at right now is the center. That way it'll leave your point, it'll put your pointer to the center, so it shows that you're in neutral trim right now. And then of course, then you move it all the way to the top till it turns off, which is what we got our little set screws here for. And then you'll say that's the top, and that's the bottom. And then you'll turn it, and that's how you'll calibrate the G3X display that'll be on your panel showing your trim. So anyhow, that's what that little string and this sensor here is for. So I'll route that wire back around, it goes to the clamp too, and that's where the connector is here. So it's connecting, you make sure if you got the pre-wire kit, that you got the separate sensor, trim sensor wire. And then then there's two power wires coming off of that. It's gonna go to your motor, okay? Your motor's red and black, it comes up, and there's two power wires. You can see the ends of them right there. They're crimp-ons. So that's coming from the harness. So I run that through there. Make sure you have enough room there that you can connect these to them. Also, you wanna be sure when you got, these are the trim sensor wires. Remember, this is gonna be traveling up and down. So don't do it so it's so short. You adjust these when you got it in a full up position. So when you're gonna test it, you have to, I get somebody to help me and hold, excuse me, hold this right here, because later when you put your connector stabilizers into here, it's not gonna move side to side, but now as you're doing it, you'll wanna turn this side to side, and it actually kind of lock up. So get somebody just to hold this straight, run it all the way to the top till your jack screw gets, just about, I forget what they tell you, but I just get a thread or so below it. When this gets up to about a thread, I want this limit switch to be hitting this bolt. It's gonna go in and we can adjust this bolt up or down. So get it up close to it, look at it, have somebody hold it so you be sure the limit switch is gonna come right up and hit that screw head, and that it stops it. When you hit that, it'll stop it, and make sure you're there. Do the same thing to the bottom. Just run it down where you're a 1/16 of an inch or a thread or whatever from hitting the bottom, and that's your bottom adjusting screw, and that's the bottom limit switch right there, like that, okay? So you're just gonna make those adjustments, tighten the set screws, set nuts that you've got on those, and then torque seal them. Once you've got, so you're sure while you're up, you can be sure you got plenty of wire so that all the way in the up position, that this has enough wire to go up and down. And then when you do it, after you got that, then you can pull the excess, make it all fit nice, come back over here, and then clamp it in, secure it in the clamp. Then you come back and tie wrap everything nice and neat. later. I'm actually missing, normally you'd have cables, but I'm missing a lot of things on this build that are back order. So here's one of the cables coming back, and then I'm gonna have rudder cables that I don't have either. They'll be coming back. And there's a certain way we gotta route those through here, which I go over in another thread. But we'll make sure all these wires are clear of everything, and we gotta put some tape, some of that friction tape, not friction tape, but it's a clear, like a Teflon, real slick tape, so that I forget which way it rubs, but one way or the other, it gets real close to rubbing on it as the cables come through. So then you test it. So then what you do, you want to test it is, and I also tell you which one of these numbered switches goes up and down, okay? I believe it was the E goes up and the D goes down, but double check the forum post on that, on which switch goes where, okay? Once you got it done, you see I've made some little wire deal where I can stretch them out. I use it every once in a while to test electronics and stuff. But anyway, you take this and go to one, this is just a regular aircraft battery. I take one side of it and attach it to the negative on the battery. Then I come up here and I actually attach it. There's a cable, there's a negative connector. That round connector goes to this, that's a ground. So we've taken one of the connectors here that goes to, that's the ground. We'll just take it and I clip that on that ground nut on there, and that makes the ground. I'm not going to actually do it right now, but I already have. And then, so that gives you a ground. Then you come up here and you'll take these two wires. There's two orange wires that go all the way. See, I got a piece of green tape on here so I know which one's which. One of them is a something 6, and one is a something 7, okay? So you can see here, maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. That's 7D. I think this is 6E. Yeah, so it's 6. Anyway, I just go 6 and 7. So I put this on the 6. If you put, now you're going to connect both of these wires. You leave that ground wire connected. If you take the 6, if the 6, which is my tape, if the 6 goes to positive and the 7 goes to negative, the trim motor should run down, okay? So if you got the switches back there correct, it'll go down. Then when you actually reverse it, you put the 6 on the negative and that on the positive, and you do that, it'll run the other way, okay? It'll run up. So you can run it up and down, making sure it's running smooth, and that's how you can do it to also make sure you've got your limit switches in the right place and you're enough of your wires loose here to give you some clearance before you wrap it all up. And once you got that, then go ahead and just run those wires back up through there, run them back down through the belly. I'm gonna come back and I'll get the wires all tucked away, put some silicone in here for the evening and let that set up and be dry. Come back and safety wire, you know, these pins that went through here. And I guess I talked about that enough. You just, yeah, we did that. And I just took when you get ready to put that pin, like I said, there's a hole already in this sleeve, and there's a hole already in this jack screw. You'll notice it. So you see that this sleeve is all the way up against the top of the jack screw, okay? So if you push it all the way up, there's just a little bit of play, see it there? But you can push it all the way up, and then you can take the sleeve and turn it, or hold the sleeve and turn the jack screw just enough to where you can see that hole through there. Just move it around until you see that this hole is kind of lined up with that hole. You might have to move the sleeve, wiggle it just a little bit, take another one of those picks or something and stick through there and kind of line it up. Once you got that lined up, this is the first hole you're gonna drill. You drill it with a 30 straight through. You just match drill through all the way through, stick a pin in there. So now you're connected to the jack screw. Then down here, you've got this hole already here on this side. This hole is in the sleeve, but there's no hole at all in the motor. So what you're gonna do then is you're gonna rotate this around. I just take a pair of pliers and put it right here. And I just take it and move it a little bit at a time with a flashlight, shine in it until I see that hole is over that blue area that I put the Sharpie on. Okay, move it, because that's a pretty wide spot there. But anyway, I move it back and forth. I'm kind of centered in that blue area, and that's it. Now just drill a hole. You max drill through this hole here, drill it all the way through the motor hole, and then stick that, then just take that pin, it'll just stick in there. enough to get it started, and take a hammer. I just take a hammer and a punch and put the punch on the end, and just a wide punch, and just hit it till it's flush. And that's pretty easy to do. Like I said, then we got to run some safety wire like it shows you there. So what'd I forget? Well, anyway, that's about 30 minutes. So that should hopefully help you out with that.